Welcome everybody to the second last of the OTM Outreach series. It's been a fantastic couple of months, actually 3 months. I can't believe how quickly that time has gone since those of us in Queensland anyway were advised to start working from home if we can, and things started to change with lots of businesses having to close temporarily and generally a state of upheaval for the majority of us in our working and our home lives. But we've I think managed to get through the worst of it, definitely the worst of the health situation in Australia and in Queensland. Lots to be done though for businesses and in our professional capacity. I'm really excited for this session today. We have three awesome panelists who are joining us. Today our theme is, I should introduce, I'm Amy Ward from OTM. We have a bit of a theme today. The ladies on our panel are all representing different industry bodies or industry categories in the work that they do in communications and engagement. So we're really going to look at what does it mean to be the collective voice for your industry during a time of crisis or great change or upheaval, and that's certainly what most of us have been facing in the last few months. So we've got with us today, we have Clarissa Brandt, who is Strategic Relations and Communications Manager for Timber Queensland, representing the timber industry in the state of Queensland. We have Jess Daly, who is the Head of Content and Communications for the Royal Australian College of General Practitioners. I was hoping I wouldn't get that wrong. I'm so used to saying the RACGP. And that's a national role. It's a national body, and that's a national role that Jess has. And we have Brooke Donovan, who's joining us in her capacity as the President for the International Association of Business Communicators. She's the President of the IABC in Queensland. Jess also has a full-time role with Trade and Investment Queensland, but I think you'll be mostly wearing your IABC hat with us here today. So welcome ladies, and thank you very much for giving up your time to be with us here today and to share what's going to be some great insights, I think, with our community. For anybody who hasn't joined these sessions before, they came about at the end of March or late March when we were all looking at how we needed to respond to the coronavirus situation in Australia, and it was actually an idea of our team of let's set up a free helpline for our clients and our community of marketers and communicators, and it evolved into these weekly sessions. And we've been really fortunate to have some amazing guest panelists joining us each week and sharing their insights. I know for one, I've been learning a lot and getting some great insights from the different organisations and how they've been responding to the situation. So enough from me. I might let the three panelists, perhaps if you wouldn't mind, ladies, each giving a little bit more of an introduction of yourselves and the role that you've been playing. And I think to kick off the conversation would be great if you could have a bit of a think about some of the, I guess, the key things that you've been focused on in the last few months. And then we'll get into some of the questions that I've got prepared for you. Also, for everybody who's on the call, if you're familiar with Zoom, you'll know there's a chat and a Q&A function. If you're not, I think on most people's screens, the chat and Q&A buttons are at the bottom of your screen. If you would like to pose any questions throughout the conversation for myself or any of our panelists, please feel free to just pop those questions into the chat window, so into a little chat button down the bottom, and we'll be able to see that as panelists and answer your questions live for you. But I might hand over now to our panelists. Clarissa, would you like to start off with introducing yourself and what you've been doing with Timber Queensland?
Yeah, sure. So obviously, you mentioned I do communications and strategic relations. So Timber Queensland, we represent from the forest and timber industry in Queensland, and that basically entails from plantation growers right through to the end users of timber, architects, engineers, builders. It's a very big industry. Not many people realise how big the industry is in Queensland. Got about $3.2 billion turnover a year, 25,000 people support the industry, or the industry supports those 25,000 jobs. So the last few months, our main focus has obviously been initially just the volume of information coming from everywhere. So trying to sort through that and work out what really was important to give our members, and put it into a much more easy to understand language. A lot of the initial information from the state and federal government, particularly around JobKeeper, when all of that came out. So that that information management role was really important. And then as time has started to go by, the recognition that basically, because we're a building products industry, essentially, the building construction industry, the sales pipeline is very soon going to come, fall off a cliff. Whilst some industry has been quite busy to date, finishing up projects, nothing new is really coming online. So we immediately had to jump on the bandwagon of lobbying the state government, because we're state-based, supporting Queensland Master Builders and HIA in their calls for what the building industry needs. So supporting them, and we've done that publicly, but behind the scenes a lot as well. So we do a lot of lobbying and advocacy. So they've been our main two focuses over the last few months. But along the way, all the normal industry issues are still there. It hasn't all been COVID-19 as well. Just been continuing with those day-to-day functions. So,
and I can only imagine, and it's probably similar for all of us, that it's striking that balance between the immediate response to the changes from COVID-19, but also not forgetting those business as usual things that can't stop, and probably trying to do all of that with the same resources that you had prior to all of this.
Exactly, and trying to deliver them in a different way, as we've all been doing online.
Yes. All right, I might come back to some of those points you've mentioned about information management and that government lobbying, because it'd be nice to delve into a bit of how you've done that. But I will get, Jess, if you wouldn't mind introducing yourself and just where some of your focus has been.
Yeah, so my name is Jess, and I head up the content and communication team at the RACGP. And as Amy mentioned, it's a national organisation. We represent about 40,000 members, and that's everyone from medical students with an interest in general practice as a specialty through to those who are actually in the general practice training program. So after they've graduated medical school, they become what we call GPs in training, and they go through their training program with the support of the RACGP and RTOs. And then, of course, those who are fellowed members of the RACGP. So your GP that you might have a relationship with, 9 out of every 10 in Australia are members of the RACGP. So it's a big representative body of a very diverse profession. And I guess the biggest challenge for us over the last few months is that GPs are actually on the front line of responding to COVID-19. So lots of, from mum and dad practices through to super clinics, the readiness of general practice to respond to a pandemic like this is really varied. I guess the benefit of state-based hospital and health systems are that they're so structured and there's so much governance, and they know exactly what they need to do when they're responding to a disaster in the community or a pandemic. Whereas general practice is a little bit more ambiguous and fluid in that there's not the same process in every general practice. So for us, like for Clarissa, it was really about the volume of information coming through and how we could advise 40,000 members in all parts of Australia, all of the different information that's relevant to them, because you might recall very early in the pandemic, it was very much state by state making decisions about what was best for their community rather than that national approach. Really would have worked for us if there was a national approach, but in this case there wasn't. So it was trying to figure out, okay, well, what do these testing requirements mean for GPs in South Australia? What do they mean for Queensland GPs? What does it mean if we're going to close the borders? What does it mean if we're going to require people to go to hospitals? What can our GPs do to support their communities? And therefore, what can we do to provide them with timely information that's going to help them do that? So in a similar way to Clarissa, we had our BAU projects. You mentioned that your work kind of, the dial turned down a little bit on some of the work that you were expecting to do, but for us, it didn't stop. We still needed to host exams for GPs in training. We still needed to run campaigns to attract people to general practice, to the Australian General Practice Training Program. So we still had our BAU work and then had to pivot in a massive way to figure out, okay, well, how can we actually deliver value to our members? And that has involved, I guess, a lot of hours and a lot of redoing what would sometimes take us months to do. So that's the benefit of a crisis, right? We haven't wasted a good crisis. We've certainly looked at doing things differently at the RACGP and delivering that information to our members in a really timely fashion while getting on with the business of, you know, some of the other things that we had planned this year. I think I was talking to Amy in advance, and I'm just amazed that we've still delivered a lot of the stuff that was in our operational plan and added a heap more on top. So really, I think I'm just lucky that I have a phenomenal team who can deliver over capacity a lot of the time, because that's what it's been for us for the last 3 months, not forgetting that we had bushfires directly before COVID. So we were supporting GPs in southern New South Wales and Victoria with supporting their communities responding to bushfires. And then we rolled pretty much straight into COVID. So this has been 6 months almost unlike any other in my professional career.
Yeah, wow. You mentioned your team there. I've made a note here, and perhaps one of you can remind me if I forget to come back to it. It would be good to understand the skills mix and what's been important to you as a team and what's worked for you and what you might carry forward. But that's a lot of sub-questions. So I might just jump to you, Brooke, to get you to do an intro of yourself and what you do with the IABC. I think we'd all be really interested to hear, because you're representing our profession of communicators and marketers and people in engagement roles. What has mattered to us and what have you been seeing?
Thanks, Amy. Well, for those of you who don't know, the International Association of Business Communicators, it's a global organisation with 99 chapters. It was established in 1970, so it's been around for a long time, serving communication professionals. And in Queensland, we're very much in a phase of building the profile of the organisation, really delivering higher levels of value for our members, and really promoting the value that the organisation can offer the profession. And I think with the onset of COVID-19 and this crisis, the value of an organisation like this, I think, has really come to the forefront, because we've been able to draw upon that network of thousands of professional communicators worldwide, and to facilitate that access to information and resources on topics. Everybody right now wants to know about crisis management and leadership and content curation and just as we know, the challenges of getting out there with information that is relevant and timely and concise and really what people want. So we've been able to be really responsive to that, which is amazing. From a chapter level, we have access to this amazing library of resources at a global level. So that's made it really quite straightforward for us to promote that to our network in Queensland, and also then to think about those local offerings that we can do. So we're starting to roll out a little program of webinars for people. So on, as I say, the stuff that people really want right now, which is crisis management, content, digital tools. So big focus for us right now, but a slightly different position as well that we're in, being a relatively small chapter and a pretty small board of volunteers. So when you've got crazy stuff going on at work, and for some of our members, focused on that event space, their businesses have been really affected, and so you've got to be realistic about what you can do as a small group of volunteers in this situation. So we're very much focused on what is it that we can do fairly easily that's going to deliver the best value to our members.
Fantastic, thanks, Brooke. And I can attest to, I actually quite fortuitously joined up to the IABC earlier this year, prior to any of this COVID-19 situation. It turned out to be very good timing, because there have been some amazing resources that have been useful for us when we're advising different businesses that we're working with. So that was very good timing. So in our conversation today, because of the fact that you're all representing different associations, that's going to be a natural theme, I guess, in our conversation. And I'm aware that several of the people who have registered for this session are also representing industry associations. So when we think about the strategies, and I'm looking at my notes here, the strategies and tactics for you as communicators and marketers, I guess we need to think about how they might be a little bit different to someone who's representing a single organisation. Clarissa, I'd like to turn to you. If you did touch on some of the things that have been priorities for you over the last few months. The big issues for your industry sector, so for the timber industry that you've had to address, how have you actually done that? So you mentioned government lobbying and some information management. Would you mind just spending a few minutes giving us some examples of how you've actually addressed that?
Yeah, sure. I guess to address information management to start with, you know, just the volume, because obviously we get information sources from many, many places. So there was just so many emails coming in. Obviously, like many different organisations, we realised that to have a central repository on our website, so we were able to quickly, you know, create appropriate pages. And being a very small, nimble organisation, we can just do that like that. It's not a process of having to, you know, go to a different department. So, you know, various people involved. So we could just do that very quickly. We also decided that we were overwhelmed by the amount of information. So when we used to getting lots of information, so I felt our members were also getting information, not just from us, from lots of people. So we didn't want to overwhelm them with too much information as well. And, you know, quite often during a normal period, they might receive communication from myself, they might receive communication from our CEO, our communications officer. So there's, you know, a few different names, people that they would be used to hearing from. Decided we just had to have one person, one name that anything was coming from. So, you know, there was like a central source of truth. And we decided that really they only should hear from us once a week, you know, maximum twice. I think once, maybe we sent out a member alert twice, once, because things were happening very quickly, but a lot of the information wasn't necessarily just related to the forest and timber industry. So it could be compiled. So into a once a week thing. So that's how we decided to manage the information. So everything was put on our website. We did fact sheets. So it was on the website, but we also put everything into fact sheets so people could download them. Also cognizant of our membership base. Not all of our members are like real business corporate people. We've got some members we even have one member who doesn't even have email. You know, there's a real variety. So they needed to have websites. We needed to have downloadable things that they could print out and read. So we responded in that way. So that was the information management part of it. And then in terms of our government stakeholders, initially, you know, for a while, we weren't really asking for anything to start with, because no one knew what was going on and trying to work out what was required. So when it became clear that there were a few issues that members needed help with, we as an organisation, we don't immediately go out to the media saying this is what we want. Things are done behind the scenes, just calls to all of our regular government contacts, writing letters, just those normal things that we do in terms of advocacy. Then when it became clearer that some government stimulus is required for the building construction industry, that's when we started putting out some media thing to support, because it was across the board, everybody was asking that. We also on Twitter, connections with a lot of government stakeholders on that, so putting things out through that channel. And then we've got to the point where we have done a campaign with our members. So it wasn't necessarily from Timber Queensland, but is from industry, and we coordinated the campaign at Timber Queensland. So we've done like letters to the government, and then a social media campaign based around the Making It for Queensland hashtag that Growing Queensland has put out. So, and that's been very successful. So they're the three the main things that we've been doing.
Okay, great. And I should just mention, I think we have someone in the attendee list for this call, if Kelly's on the line. If anyone does have any questions around that Making It for Queensland campaign, Kelly will also be happy to answer those, even though she's not sitting on the panel.
Oh, she might be very tired of all of it. The Forest and Timbers has really got behind this campaign, and we've been flooding the Growing Queensland site with forestry images, and it's been really good. Oh no, we love it, Clarissa. That's great. It's been really good for us too.
Oh, good. So that's really interesting, because I know that we go very quickly to digital a lot of the time these days, and rightly so. That's how a lot of us market and communicate, and it's very effective. But a lot of the things you've cited there, Clarissa, are good old-fashioned stakeholder engagement and communication. So direct communication to members, identifying, I'm guessing, your key influential stakeholders, and when it became necessary, doing that sort of engagement. I think it's really important that we don't forget the importance of that, and it's a really strategic approach, and it's issues based.
Yeah, that's where we come from to start. Just the traditional relationship management, getting on the phone, writing an official letter generally, because then the government has to respond to that rather than just an email. So that's where we start from, and then go to the more modern techniques.
Yeah. And has the social media channel initiatives worked for you as well?
They certainly, we were really pleased to see the government come out this week and, in their stimulus packages, one of the things that we've been asking for, along with the master builders, was the cyclone household resilience program. So some funding has been delivered to that. So that's not directly impact from the social media campaign that we've been working for, but it all helps. Look, I know Cameron Dick has certainly been liking a lot of our posts, and he's now in a very influential position. He was already a friend of our industry, so who knows? What has been fantastic about it is that it's set the stage for the next phase of what we are going to be doing, which is a campaign about buying Queensland timber, supporting local businesses.
And probably a good time.
Well, we were very fortunate that we already had the basis of everything set up, so now it's just ramping it all up. But it was like we had that there before COVID, so it was fortunate.
No, that's fortuitous. Thanks, Clarissa. Jess, I'm going to turn back to you again. You mentioned already some of the fact that you've had to fast track. I think you might have said either in our pre-conversation or just before that you've jammed like a year's worth of work into a 3-month period. Can you tell us a little bit? I'm interested in how you've taken a lot of your face-to-face training and events and things, which, correct me if I'm wrong, but that's a really important part of your organisation. How did you manage to get all that physical stuff delivered digitally in such a short space of time?
We haven't got it all delivered digitally yet, but setting aside that approach of centralised, single source of information for all of our members, which broke it down based on their state-by-state needs, the very public advocacy we've done just around personal protective equipment for GPs, because it was very hard to get supplies to general practice, and also negotiating with the government over additional MBS item numbers so we can all access our GP through telehealth at the moment. One thing that we had to do very quickly was that we run clinical conferences for our GPs. We run face-to-face continuing professional development, which is required for a GP to maintain their top billing rate with the government. And we also run face-to-face exams, which see about 1,000 GPs in training coming together in clinical spaces across the country at the same time on the same day in order to complete their fellowship exams so they can be a fully qualified GP. We run those twice a year. One session was to be held in May, and we're looking ahead to one in November. So the first thing that we had to do when we realized actually this is a little bit more serious and there are more regulations coming from government about that face-to-face contact was to postpone everything. And that's really disappointing for a GP in training, for example, who's been studying for 4 years, to complete this fellowship exam. They're almost there, they're booked into the exam, and then they're told, really sorry, but we're going to have to postpone. I think that's a bit of a bitter pill to swallow. And similarly for our clinical conference, which we hold in October every year, and then a practice owners conference, which we hold in May every year, they've been postponed. Our innovation hackathon series for GPs, which is about bringing innovative ideas for general practice to the fore, all of it's been postponed. So we've worked very quickly to firstly move our state faculty events into webinars, very similar to this, noting that like GPs, as with many other professionals, are probably totally over being online at the moment, but we did transition very quickly. Our events and experience team have done a great job working with our faculties to just figure out the digital technology. We were never digital events people before COVID, but more and more we have to be. So they have pivoted incredibly quickly to be able to deliver most of our CPD that was planned to be face-to-face in an online environment. For our clinical conference that was due to be held in October, we're actually going to do a hybrid event. We're pushing it out to November, and that hybrid event will be all of our plenary done online. So our plenary speakers, where everyone can just link into that. We'll have either in sort of hub links in every state and territory, so that you can go to Brisbane or Townsville and be with 100 of your GP colleagues instead of 1,500 and dial into this plenary, as well as have localized face-to-face workshops in whatever location you're in. So we've picked what the themes will be, and then each state and territory will figure out, okay, well, what can we deliver locally for a really small, discrete group of GPs, but still gives them that collegiality, which is one of the main benefits of being in a member organisation, but then allows them to dial into those plenaries as they're happening as well. So we're going to do that hybrid conference for our clinical conference. Obviously with that, instead of everyone flying to Perth, where it was due to be hosted this year, there are some more venue costs, but maybe not as big as a convention centre like we would normally hold it in. And for those participants, I think the cost of entry are a lot lower as well. So rather than, I think it's $1,400 or $1,500 for a 2-day conference, the cost will be much lower. But we've still got to kind of balance our cost of delivering those events in many more locations this time around.
I think it's a really, I mean, I guess it will remain to be seen, but I think it will be a very effective way of holding big events going forward.
We don't expect to ever go back. Yeah, we don't expect to ever go back to, you know, those flying to different locations for a 2-day or a 3-day clinical conference. It's, you know, just as our workplaces and working worlds have changed, I really don't think events are ever going to be delivered the same for us again.
Can I just ask, Jess, with your annual conference, do you have a lot of sponsorship on that? And so what are you doing in regards to the sponsors? Yeah, so our partnerships team are working with really closely with all of our sponsors who had already agreed to roll over to, we call it GP20, so the GP20 conference. And we're looking at sort of local opportunities for them, as well as what we can do with that digital plenary in terms of advertising partnerships for that sort of webinar. We've never really had sponsored webinars in the past, but that is a space that we need to open up to, because we've got a lot of partners that are looking to extract value. So we need to figure out the best way that we can deliver them value with a completely different way of events. And I have to say that some of our partners were probably already in the space of looking to move away from that transactional relationship of just like, you get a booth at this event and you get access to these GPs. So we were really looking, we brought on a new head of partnerships recently, and she's really looking to transform the way that we deliver partnership to organisations that are aligned with our values. So there was already movement happening in that space to move it away from transactional relationships. And I think that there will always be space for that. But I think for our big multi-year kind of flagship partnerships, we'll be delivering it a little bit differently moving forward.
Do you think there'll be the same call for investment for sponsors in events like this? Because a lot of the time, you know, the sponsors are there to help cover the cost of running the events. If the cost model changes, I'm guessing that means the sponsorship model, the fees and things change as well.
Yeah, probably. I see Clarissa, you're nodding.
Yeah, I think so. I've just put together like a 2021 events plan, all online, and so the standard pricing that we would put against events. Yeah, I've reduced it because I'm aware, obviously, of the situation that everybody's in. There's going to be less income, so their marketing budgets are not going to be as big. But yeah, like why should they pay as much if we're not having to pay as much? Just doesn't.
There is.
It's not the right thing to do.
I've been thinking about this because we've been doing this for a few clients, as well as they're looking at their events and engagement strategies for 2021. And again, a lot of events moving online. The cost of the physical things goes away, but there's actually, it might not be a one-to-one relationship, but there is, I think, an increase in the amount of time involved or expertise that needs to get involved in bringing online communities together. And we need to be careful in our budgeting that we don't forget that. So there might be fewer, venue costs, and maybe you don't have, there might be more costs for senior people, I think, is what I'm thinking in organising these online things.
Okay.
Potentially. And also, I think you have to remember that sometimes it's about the value, not necessarily the cost. So people will pay for whatever they value. So as long as what you're delivering is in lockstep with what your members are after, people will pay for that. They will pay the cost that you set because it's valuable to them. So that's something we've had to grapple with in terms of our membership renewal is in market at the moment. And I know that our board considered really carefully, well, what do we do in terms of our membership fee this year? Because I don't know, maybe like me, you've had your health insurance company say they're going to put their fee rise on hold for 6 months. And lots of other associations have sort of thought about, well, what do we do for our membership fees? And that's something that has been really carefully considered at the RACGP. Well, is it about the cost or is it about the value? And I can't tell you what the outcome of that is because it's in market at the moment. So we'll see whether members resonate with the value, because that's how we chose to dial up our messaging for that campaign, is all about the value that we have delivered you in the last year. And we didn't raise fees. We've kept our fees on hold since 2018. But it was that, do we drop our fees this year, or do we stand behind the value that we deliver to members and see if that resonates with our members? Could be a terrible decision, but we'll see.
Well, you've still got to keep you've got to run as an organisation, and so you can't stop all your revenue streams as well. I'm just going to quickly jump. There's a question come in from one of our attendees for you, Jess. What types of content have resonated best with your members, and have you noticed a change in trends from pre-COVID content?
Well, we've noticed that, for example, our website stats have gone absolutely crazy. And that's because we, like Clarissa, made that decision to have a single source of truth for all of our information. So that rather than sending EDM after EDM with lots of different information that GPs would then have to go back and search for, we housed it on the website. We did need to send communication every single day to our members in the beginning. And that was, we developed a new channel, which was the COVID bulletin, that we sent to all of our members and those who wanted to subscribe to it. So it was going to maybe 43,000 people a day. And that was the latest updates state by state. So that was dynamic content delivered to all of those people that was only relevant. If you're in Queensland, you got the Queensland stuff plus the national stuff. So we found that the online content works really well. Anything from our president has also worked particularly well. So that peer-to-peer in an association is obviously more valuable than a CEO talking to GPs. So any sort of content from our president has worked really well. And also, just because it is a health pandemic, my media team has done a bloody phenomenal job in terms of their very public advocacy at this time. So it's just, we're pitching the right stories at the right time and it's getting real results for us. In terms of our public-facing communications, we did not have in our operational plan to do a brand GP campaign at all in the first 6 months of this year. That was more like the back end of, the second quarter of the new financial year. But we pulled into market a brand GP campaign within 4 weeks. And that's a campaign that's all about expert advice and why it matters. And that was a TV and predominantly online, but a bit of TV advertising as well. And that's worked really well on social and worked really well in terms of the results that we've seen from the community. We're actually doing our post-campaign research today. So let's hope
What are your most effective social media channels have you found?
For us at the moment, we thought it was going to be Facebook. So we invested pretty heavily in Facebook, but it's actually YouTube. We just get such good results on YouTube. And I'm really keen to see the breakdown of age demographics and things like that on the campaign in terms of our digital results. But we really do get good traction on YouTube, and also value for money, because if you're buying those ads on YouTube, it only they only use TrueView. So if someone's got to watch the full ad for you to have to pay for the ad. So even if they watch 10 seconds of it and still absorb the message, you're not paying for that ad. So that works for us, where we have the campaign to actually invest in advertising.
Interesting. Okay, great. Thank you. I'll move over to you, Brooke. You touched a little bit on the things that have mattered for us as communicators. So crisis communications being a big one, and content. What do you think we should be focusing on as communicators? So if you look at what we've been, let me reform my question. If you look at what we've been asking for help with as communicators and what we've been focused on, does that match with where you think our focus should be as communicators, particularly as we start to come out of this first really acute phase of the COVID-19 situation, and perhaps going back to whatever the new normal business as usual will be?
I think it's a really good question, actually, Amy. And from an IABC point of view, we're very focused on supporting the comms profession to move from this kind of very transactional information sort of space that we've been in for a number of years to a much more value-driven proposition. So really supporting communicators to prove their value to the organisation that they're working in or for. And putting strategies in place across that employee engagement, internal communication is I think huge, obviously, right now. And this crisis has enabled a lot of communicators to really start to prove their value. I think where we get relied on quite heavily as the sort of the chain, the end of the chain. And I think now we've been much more able to get a seat at the table. And I think that certainly will help, the profession advance, drive itself forward, and prove that value. So, so we're doing a lot in that space.
That's something that came up in one of our previous calls. We were talking about leadership in marketing, and that we had questions coming in from the community around, is this a bad time to be thinking about career progression and things like that? And the advice from the people we had on the panel was absolutely not. In fact, it's the opposite. This is the time for any role in an organisation, it's the time for people to step up and prove their worth. Be proactive, think about the strategies for your organisation, and think ahead a little bit, particularly if you're in a communication or a marketing type role. We are in really fortunate positions in our organisations, because we generally have a bird's eye view of, or should, if we're going to be good and effective at what we do, we should have a bird's eye view as to what's going on across an entire organisation. We should also be the touch point with the market that our organisation is engaging with. So whether that's a membership body, an industry body, clients, consumers, whatever it is that your particular brand or organisation is communicating with, the people in comms and the people in marketing should make it their business to understand what's going on in your industry, and it's been said time and again over the last few months, pick up the phone, talk to people who represent your customer base or your community base, and understand what's going on for them, where are their heads at, what's the emotion, what's mattering to them in their business or in their personal life. Is it finances, is it mental health, is it the state of their business, is it their staff, is it their job? Whatever it is, we're in I think a unique position in our organisations to be able to step up and take a leadership position. So it's really nice to hear you say that, Brooke, that's sort of an area that you're hoping to encourage, I guess, the profession, because too often communications, you're right, it sort of gets tacked on to the end of a project plan, or oh yes, at some point we better let people know what we're doing. Well, actually, no, you probably want to think about that right back at the beginning of the planning stages. So that's really good advice. I've got so many things on my list that I want to ask you guys, but I think we've only got about 10 minutes left in this conversation. Concerns? Oh, sorry, you go, Brooke.
Is that okay? Yeah, you just said a couple of really interesting things there, Amy. And I think, as we've said, you know, for communicators, really understanding that big picture, I think, is really important in a time like this. And also, you know, that professional development. I know we at IABC Queensland, when this thing first kicked off, we were pretty cautious about going out there with too much about, hey, you know, now's the time for professional development. You know, we were really cognizant that there would be some stuff that would be directly very useful for people. So we tried to pick and choose that content really carefully, but also some of that nice to have stuff, you know, leave that to a little bit further down the line. And I think listening to people, and having those relationships and being able to say, what is it that is going to be useful for you at the moment? You know, where are you at, and what do you need from us, was a really useful thing to do as well. So we had lots of personal relationships, being a smaller organisation at that local level, that we could draw on and really understand what our members wanted from us. And that was really useful. We've got a fantastic tool in IABC called the Hub, which is, it's a global discussion forum for our members. And it has just been the best thing we could have, you know, we could have had at this point, because people are just able to jump in there and say, help, you know, we've got a disparate workforce, and you know, people are disengaged. You know, has anyone had any great ideas recently about how to address that? What do I do? And there's I was looking this morning, and there was a really big thread on pandemic workspace policy, and you know, and all this sort of stuff, which is just so incredibly useful for us at this point, and being able to draw on that network of thousands is really useful, I think, right now. Yeah.
So that platform, the Hub, I'm now a little bit familiar with it, having become a member, and it is very useful. Clarissa or Jess, do you have something similar for your member organisations to be able to get on and communicate with each other, or to give you, I guess, ask you questions or give you insights?
Yeah. I'll just say, from us, no. Most of our members like are corporate companies rather than individual members, and most of those corporates will have one person that represents their business to Timber Queensland. So we're not like, you know, 42,000 members or anything. It's a much smaller group, so we can have much more personal, you know, pick up the phone and talk to each other. You know, number of emails, you know, you can manage all the communication in that way. So I've thought over time, you know, creating, you know, forums through, you know, Facebook or LinkedIn, but once again, not all of our membership are totally, you know, online all the time. They're out, you know, cutting trees down or doing, you know, sawmilling. So no, we haven't done that.
We do have a few things. Like, there are the formal structures within the RACGP, which is our rec committees, which are made up of practicing GPs from all over the country, and they're based on particular topics like research or post-fellowship education. We have, so they're really useful to tap into if you need some, a bit of a litmus test on things. The other thing is that we have Facebook groups for every faculty. So private Facebook groups where, if you're in Victoria, you can talk to your colleagues in Victoria about whatever's relevant to you. If you're in the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander health faculty as well, there's a Facebook group for you. But something really smart that our CEO did at the very beginning of this was pull together a working group with GPs who are specialists in disaster management, and a number of our GPs from our board. And we've been meeting twice a week to really understand exactly what fears, what concerns, what hopes our membership have had through this time, because they're really connected people. So rather than us calling 40,000 members and finding 40,000 different views, they're tapping into what's happening in their states, what's happening in their GP community, what's happening in their broader health community, and feeding that back to us. So something that we weren't really cognizant of was how much fear there was. And so our job had to be to allay some of those fears by being really clear with our communication and being really consistent with our communication.
And do you monitor those Facebook groups manually, or do you use some digital tools to help with that?
We use some digital tools and a bit of manual observation. So we use Meltwater and Hootsuite, the sort of more advanced Hootsuite, to sort of do brand tracking. So that obviously monitors beyond our own social groups and the broader social world.
Yeah.
Because there are some GPs who love to complain on Twitter. So it's good to know what they're saying, but not take it too personally. So yeah, we use manual tools. We've got a person who looks after social, but we also use some technology as well.
Okay, all right. In the few minutes that we've got left, could we perhaps go around, and if there's either a reflection that's perhaps a learning for each of you that you would like to share that you think is really important from the last 3 months, or something for looking forward, something that you think is important that the audience could take away into their own organisations. Maybe I could start with you, Brooke. We'll mix it up a bit this time.
I'm really sorry. I just had an urgent thing come in and I was quickly focused on that.
That's a bit like when the teacher asks you to answer a question and you weren't listening.
So sorry. I'm putting that away. That's wait. Can you say that again for me, Amy?
Yes, I was just hoping that as we wrap up today's session, if maybe you could leave us all with either what's maybe been your greatest learning from the last few months that might be useful for us all to take back into our organisations, or something that you're thinking about for looking forward. Again, something that might be useful for all of us as we go back into our own worlds and think about how that might apply.
Yeah, thank you so much. Sorry about that. Look, I think the main challenge for us has been pivoting our strategy. So our strategy to grow our chapter in Queensland and deliver increasing value to our members was very much around the face-to-face events. So for us, I mean, clearly a lot of people have had to pivot that to an online format, which is fairly straightforward. But also just thinking about how we connect that local offering with the global offering to really promote those membership benefits, and also member retention, I think, is our biggest challenge right now. So again, it is promoting that value as much as we can. We've got discounts in place on membership at the moment through to the end of June, just to recognise that a lot of people are in a really tough space right now, but still want and need access to professional development. So I think we did come up with a strategic framework that allows us, a year or so ago, that allows us to review and just refine and adapt according to what's happening at the time. So yeah, a few things that we're thinking about.
Okay, thank you. Clarissa?
I think it's kind of, from our perspective, just staying the path that we're on. Like, there's some extra issues. Obviously, the buying local and things like that, that will amp that up. But the fundamental workplace health and safety, like this morning I'm dealing with issues about, sawmilling code of practices, and those things don't go away. They're the core business for our members. So we can't get taken up with the stress of the moment. We've got to keep focused on what our core mission is, which is representing our members' needs to government and promoting and increasing the use of Queensland grown and processed timber. So we just need to stay focused on those issues. Look, there goes my husband. I told him not to do that.
He knew he only had a minute to get into the shot.
I'll just turn his phone off. So stay focused, but adapt where necessary. And to reutilise a lot of the stuff that we've already got, like what I was saying, this Buy Queensland Timber campaign that we've got, that was sitting in the drawer. It was, something that we did years ago. Suddenly, fantastic, let's rip that out and we can go with it really fast. And I'm sure we've all got things like that sitting in drawers that you can reutilise and act quickly on things.
Yeah, I think that's a really good advice for any organisation. Like, yes, you do need to react and respond to the current situation, but you cannot forget the core reason why you're in business and why you exist as an organisation. And you have to make sure that you keep delivering value to your client base, or in your case, ladies, your member base organisation. So I think that's a great thought to leave us with, Clarissa. Jess, in the last couple of minutes, anything you'd like to leave us with?
Everything that the ladies have already said, plus your team is everything. So look after your people. Like, I am really fortunate. I have a pretty big team, and that's marketers, media people, comms people, people who are editors of medical publications, social, digital producers, super lucky. But if you don't look after them at a time when you're going to be calling on them to do a lot more, you won't survive. So I think you've got to look after your people and look after your peers as well. So not just people who report to you, but people who are your peers, because it's so easy to burn out in these situations when you've got that dual mission of reacting and also staying the path.
It's 2 o'clock. Fantastic. That's excellent advice. My computer has just told me it is 2 o'clock, so it is time for us to wrap up today's session. Truly appreciate your generosity with time and sharing your insights today, ladies. I'm very, very quickly going to try and share a screen here. Next week will be the final webinar in this series that we've run. We'll do a bit of a reset, and maybe later on in the year we'll come back with another set of sessions. But in the webinar next Friday at the same time, we'll be bringing back as many of our panelists as we can. And somehow between now and next Friday, we're going to figure out the most effective way of having this many people in a live webinar. And we may even open it up that all the attendees also live in the session, so that we can have a truly interactive session. We will do a bit of a highlights reel and a recap on some of the top insights and advice that have come out from our amazing set of people that have come and shared their insights with us. So I hope to see as many of you as we can for that last one next week. And of course, as always, if you think of any questions after the fact, or if there's something that you would like to ask me or any of the team, you can do that by emailing me directly if you know me, post onto our social media, or send us an email at helpline@theotmcompany.com, and we will do our best to answer you. If we can't, you can see up here on the screen we have a fantastic network of people that we can hopefully tap into to get your questions answered. So thank you once again, and that's it from us this week.
Thank you.